This podcast is a quest for well-being, a quest for a meaningful life through the exploration of fundamental truth. Enlightening ideas, insights on physical, mental, and spiritual health. The inspiration is love. The aspiration is to awaken new ways of thinking that can lead us to a new way of being well. Welcome to Body, Mind, and Soul Healing Conversations.
It is imperative for leaders to have a thorough understanding of the stages of grief and the nature of the grieving process. Valeria Teles interviews Anthony Casablanca, the author of The Dying Art of Leadership: How Leaders Can Help Grieving Employees Excel at Work. Anthony Casablanca is an accomplished senior executive, having spent 31 years in various leadership roles. Anthony earned his undergraduate degree from Wright State University in Dayton, Ohio, and a master's degree from Kettering University, formerly GMI. Anthony spent most of his years in leadership working for Batesville Casket Company, a recognized leader in the funeral service industry, where he was the Vice President of Human Resources and then the Vice President of Manufacturing and Logistics. Anthony was the 2009 Human Resource Executive of the Year in the state of Indiana. He went on to become president of another subsidiary of the Hillenbrand family of companies. Anthony has spent his entire career studying the art of leadership with an emphasis on purpose-driven leadership principles. Anthony has spoken on several occasions at various funeral industry conventions, was a featured speaker at an international sales, service, and operations meeting for Batesville Casket Company, and has conducted several leadership training classes for funeral providers. After retiring from Hillenbrand Inc., Anthony started Casablanca Consulting LLC to help other organizations and leaders discover their true purpose. Meet Anthony at griefleaders.com. Here is the interview with Anthony Casablanca.
In your own words, who is Anthony Casablanca?
So Anthony Casablanca is an interesting individual who spent 31 years in leadership capacities for a company by the name of Hillenbrand. And throughout that time, got very interested in purpose-driven leadership, largely through my studies of Lean. Of course, through that was one of the principles of lean leadership is respect for people. And so throughout my career, I've done everything from being a vice president of human resources to running a division subsidiary company for Hillenbrand. So I was president of an organization and had lots of leadership experiences over the years where my employees were struggling. And so when I retired back in 2015, I began to do some consulting, and then obviously recently wrote this book in conjunction with my brother Guy.
What is your definition of true leadership, Anthony?
Yeah, so true leadership, managers manage things, right? They manage results, they manage metrics, they manage processes. Leaders realize that those are things. Those things get managed, but you have to lead people. And so, true leadership to me is when a leader captures the hearts and minds of their people, and they are willing to lead with the courage to be compassionate towards their people. And to make sure that they always put their people first. I believe if you'll put your people first, you'll always achieve your mission. But if you don't, those are the functions or the teams that tend to struggle.
What insights have you gained from the events in 2020?
So probably the biggest one is that we've now found a whole new category of things that cause stress in our lives. I can remember thinking back to my leadership experiences with folks saying they wanted to work from home. Well, everybody got their wish,
Yeah,
and now everybody's saying, I need a break. I need a break. I want to get back to the office. I want to travel. I want to visit customers.
That's true.
And it's interesting because while the title of our book is The Dying Art of Leadership, and we talk about grief in a much larger context. And that definition that we use in the book is any emotionally traumatic event that is large enough to cause a shift in a person's reality will cause a person to grieve. So there have been lots of events in 2020 that would have never been on the radar screen before that are causing people to grieve. Things as simple as my wife can't go back to work because my son's school's closed and somebody's got to be here to watch our children. Or my wife got laid off or my spouse got laid off and is not getting called back and we are struggling financially now. The list just goes on and on. I'm worried about my parents contracting COVID. The list just goes on and on of events that cause people to enter the stages of grief. That's been the biggest insight for us in 2020.
Is grief somehow connected to trauma from your perspective?
So, yes. Yes, it is. If you think about any event, so a divorce, a significant illness diagnosis, right? Those are all traumatic events in somebody's life. A family that is struggling with a family member or a child who's addicted to opioids. The list is endless, right? Now you're reading a lot about work from home burnout. That burnout is actually people going through the grief stage, right? They are angry. They are bargaining that this will all be over. They are struggling, trying to accept the fact that, we can't get vaccinated quick enough. And there's a new variant of the disease and they're struggling they're in denial about all the things that are going on around them. I mean, it's call it what you will. You can call it burnout. You can call it stress. You can call it whatever you like. At some point, people go through the stages of grief as they are dealing with these issues.
And I'll be asking you more questions about the stages of grief in a moment, and more about grief too, and what you do. For now, I have a few other warm-up questions. The next one is about the purpose of life, Anthony. What do you think the purpose of the human experience is?
The way I view it is that, and you are the first one who has asked me this question, and it's an awesome question. So I think our purpose is to help each other get through this life and to make each other's lives better because we've interacted. So I've seen that play out countless times. And for sure, as part of my leadership experience, without a doubt, the leaders who are successful are the ones who try to help their people and help their teams. And so simply put, I think it's we're here to help each other. That's our purpose.
Freedom. What is the meaning of freedom to you, Anthony? What is to be free?
Freedom is remarkable, right? It's all the choices and all the liberties that we take for granted in this country. But having traveled as part of my leadership role, I had an opportunity to travel to several foreign countries and noticed that some countries people just don't look happy. And those tended to be the countries that didn't enjoy a lot of the freedoms that we enjoy here in the United States. And so I get saddened by the cancel culture that we are experiencing right now, because freedom of speech is a very important thing, and you should have the right to disagree with me, and I should not be able to impose my will by censoring you. That's not freedom of speech, right? Frankly, neither is violence. And so I look at some of the things that have gone on over the past year, and while I recognize the need for a lot of the protests and those kinds of things, I think folks have overstepped their bounds when they start destroying businesses and destroying property and the types of things that we've seen play out. But freedom is not free. Freedom is a very precious thing, and I'm so thankful for all of those who serve in this country, both in the military and first responders and firefighters, and the list goes on. Because without them, we would live in a very different place that most can't even comprehend what living in a country where you don't have what that's really even like.
So you wrote the book, The Dying Art of Leadership, How Leaders Can Help Grieving Employees Excel at Work. How did you become a writer, and what was the inspiration and also purpose of writing this book?
Sure. So the purpose of writing the book, the inspiration for writing the book, my brother and I have been looking for projects to work on together since our mom passed away back in 2010. Okay. And he's a duly licensed funeral director. He deals with grief on a daily basis. Yeah. He's schooled, obviously, as being a funeral director. He's schooled in grief counseling. And of course, I have the leadership background. And we began to read some articles that had appeared in business magazines about grief in the workplace. Yeah. And we recognized that while those articles were good, they didn't really offer a whole lot of guidance to leaders. And so, as my brother and I talked, we said, we could author a leadership book here. Based on the experiences we have, we could do more than just give folks throwaway phrases and the, don't say this, do say that kind of advice that folks were getting. Yeah. And actually give leaders a model that they could follow. And so that's how the book was born. Neither Guy or I have written anything before. And so we embarked on it knowing all along that this would be more than just a book, but there would also be a leadership training company that went along with it. Yeah. And so, it took us about a year to get the book written. Yeah. Guy wrote his half while he was in Idaho, and I wrote my half from Indiana. Yeah. And we pulled it all together, and it was amazing how little editing we really had to do. Yeah. And so we launched the book. I guess it officially launched in October on Amazon, and so here we are. But it was all driven by the realization that there was nothing out there. First of all, this is a big issue. Yeah. Costs companies a lot of money a year, $75 billion a year in lost productivity. Right. So it's a big issue, and there is no training and no books that have been written about this topic for leaders. There's lots of stuff about grief counseling for the individual, but there's nothing for leaders. And so we decided that, one way that we could maybe help folks get along a little better in life is if we tackled this particular topic from a different angle, and that being from the leadership perspective.
What are some of the greatest misconceptions about grief in general, but you can also bring it back to in a workplace?
Sure. So the biggest misconception about grief is that it only has to do with losing a loved one or a death. And frankly, that's the smallest piece. So to us, that's the biggest misconception of grief. Some of the studies that are out or have been done, the one that I quote most frequently is because it's been the largest study, is the Grief Recovery Institute did a study. And that's where the $75 billion in annual lost productivity comes from. And also as part of that study, they said that potentially as many as 1 in 4 people are grieving at any given time. So that's huge, right? That's more than a loss of an aunt or an uncle or a mother or a father or a brother. That is recognizing that loss happens anytime there is a significant enough of a traumatic event in somebody's life to alter their reality. So that is far and away the biggest misconception of grief. The second biggest misconception is that people don't want to talk about it. And that is not true, right? And even more so, people don't want to talk about it at work. And that is not true. Every single person we talked to when we interviewed our book, that we interviewed for our book, either said, I was so glad I was able to talk about my situation at work because it really helped relieve the stress, and I was able to be myself at work, or they said, I wish I had been able to talk about this at work because it just made it so much more stressful, trying to check my grief at the door and not allow it to encroach on work.
Your brother wrote, Guy Casablanca, I'm paraphrasing him, he said, it is imperative for leaders to understand the stages of grief and the nature of the grieving process. So talk to me for a moment, Anthony, about the stages of grief and the nature of the process. Right.
So there's lots of debate about the stages of grief and whether or not they are applicable. From a grief counseling standpoint, lots of folks have created other models, but Guy and I intentionally chose the 5 stages of grief, and in fact, we added a 6th one. We intentionally chose the 5 stages of grief because they play out in the workplace, right? We had to give leaders tangible things that they could wrap their arms around. So, the first stage of grief is denial. And that's where, folks get in, they are confused, they're overwhelmed, they're numb, they're trying to blame what's going on in their lives on anything they can think of, right? And then, of course, you move on to anger, and then bargaining. And bargaining is a very interesting stage because a lot of insight can come from that. Bargaining often takes bargaining also often comes from a perspective of, well, if I had only done this differently, right? I wish I would have done this, or if I would have done that, or maybe we should have done this. And so there's a lot of personal introspection that comes from that can lead to growth if it's dealt with properly, right? If the leader says, yeah, you probably should have taken your father to the doctor sooner, that is very stifling. But if the leader recognizes that folks are trying to grow through this and are just in a process of analyzing things, they can be very helpful in the process. And of course, then everybody goes, you go through depression and then ultimately acceptance. And the 6th step that my brother added in the book is one of sharing, which is where you begin to take what you've learned through your own process and share it with others so that they maybe can learn from it. And what is so powerful about these 5 stages of grief, I wrote an article called The Good Change Management Requires Good Grief Leadership. Because if you think about grief can be caused, people can enter these steps, these stages, just because of a company initiative, right? So another thing that's going on right now is companies want to get back to their pre-COVID profit levels. And so they've got all kinds of initiatives going on to cut cost and improve productivity and all of those things. And it's inducing mass change into their people's lives, from just the way work gets done to people are being asked to leave the organization, and those people are grieving. And so, denial and anger are not the same thing as resistant to change. But leaders often tag someone as being resistant to change when really they're just going through the grieving process. And so that's how this sort of all ties together. And of course, the stages of grief are not linear, although they get presented that way. No two people grieve the same way, and no two people will grieve for the same amount of time. And all of those things are things that leaders need to keep in mind as they deal with the issues that their people are dealing with. And frankly, if they choose not to engage in this process with their people, then they will see the productivity loss, and they will ultimately wind up managing folks through a performance improvement plan, which just further complicates the grief process.
You offer the solution for this situation through also not just your book, but you have the griefleaders.com, which is also a method, right, Anthony? Or a consulting company. Yeah, talk to me about how it works for leaders. Or companies, how do they engage with your services?
Sure. So, there's a couple of ways, right? But it typically starts either with a referral or through a podcast like this. Folks go to our website, and there's a contact us section where they can reach out to us for a complimentary consultation. But we basically have a 4-step process. The first step is, frankly, to conduct an assessment, right? So we will not recommend any of our services until we better understand the company's culture and how it works, and their values and things of that nature, initiatives that they have in place. Then we will do a leadership assessment to understand what the leadership culture of the organization might be. And then from those 2 data points come insights that we then tailor our training around. Although we have principles in our training that we teach, it's not a one-size-fits-all, right? We like to highly customize what we do to help it. As much as possible, we want to build on what an organization is already doing rather than telling them they have to throw it out and do it our way. And then through those 3 data points then comes another set of insights where we can recommend next steps to the organization, be it coaching or counseling or other resources or, other things that other skill capabilities that the organization may need to build, whether we can provide those or not, right? We're not looking for lifetime engagements with organizations. We're looking to come in and help them as best we can. And if there are things that we believe and the organization believes they need that are not within our scope, we are more than happy to recommend others or step aside. Because what's really important here is that the organization improves their work approach and their bottom line and their engagement and loyalty and morale and productivity with their people. Not that we, rack up a 6-figure income based on a consulting assignment. So
I do have some ending questions for you. We're almost at the end of the interview. But before that, Anthony, talk to me for a moment about the adaptive leader. What would that be or look like?
Sure. So it's actually the model we teach. It's a model that I've used throughout my career. Yeah. So adaptive leadership at its most basic premise is getting leaders to recognize that not all of their people are in the same place at the same time, right? That people have different skills and capabilities and experiences. And therefore, people need leadership that matches where they are in their development process. And so often leaders, and I was guilty of this very early in my career, leaders latch on to a leadership style that fits them or that they believe fits them, and then they apply that style to everyone that they lead. It's called managing uniformly. And the problem with that is, if you have folks who are new to an assignment, don't have very much experience with it, maybe are new to the organization, and you try to use a very empowering, participative style with them, they're going to struggle because they're not ready for that, right? But a lot of leaders sort of apply that one approach, and their philosophy is, although very unintentionally, their philosophy is, well, I'm going to make you change to what I want you to be, as opposed to me changing my style to match where you are in your development cycle. So that's what adaptive leadership really is. And it should be used, whether we're talking about helping grieving employees or not. Folks who learn how to adapt their leadership to the situation that they are in, that their people are in, that their organization is in, that a particular initiative is in, are highly successful leaders. And so we teach a model of how leaders can recognize the types of various leadership styles that people might need at different points in their career, in their lives, in their personal lives. And as it relates to our topic of helping grieving employees, adaptive leadership also means leading with compassion and engaging people where they are in their grief, and not ignoring it, and not making them feel like they can't be themselves at work, like they have to check their problems at the door, because that is not good for the organization or for the employee. And if leaders will follow the model, they will not experience the productivity loss that many other companies will face through an employee who's challenged with a traumatic situation that's impacting them deeply.
I do have those ending questions, but before I ask them, would you like to add anything or read a passage in your book?
Just that it's unfortunate, right? So leaders who do not lead with compassion, leaders who don't put people first, they may have direct reports, but they'll never have followers. And that would be a thought that I would want to leave this section of the interview with folks to just think about a little bit. Do you have direct reports, or do you have followers? Do you have people who will do anything for you and the organization because of the way that you've treated them? Or do you have people who, you're getting the minimum effort that they can provide without, getting fired? Because at the end of the day, that's really what this book is about. It's about leadership. And it's about applying that leadership to a very specific element of people's lives. But that element is so broad. I mean, look at any episode of Undercover Boss, and you will see this play out. People are dealing with a lot of stuff in their lives. And leaders would be surprised how much their people would appreciate being able to talk about this at work, and about having leaders who are willing to accommodate and give and adapt to give people the space they need at the times they need it when they're struggling the most.
It really sounds to me like leading from the heart, leading from a place of love and not fear.
It is. You are exactly right.
Thank you so much, Anthony, for this message to companies, because I usually talk to people who are entrepreneurs. They work for themselves at a different level. But this, you're bringing this to the corporate level in companies so they can understand more what love is like or looks like.
Exactly.
This is beautiful. Exactly. Thank you. How do you define success these days? What is to be successful to you?
So specifically around the book and around our Grief Leaders organization, my brother and I have come to the realization from a very early standpoint. I mean, this started out as a project, right? But it quickly moved to a mission and then a passion. And we have come to the realization that the real measure of success for what we're doing can only be counted by the number of people that we help. Either leaders, to help them adapt and grow as leaders, or grieving individuals, folks who are struggling, and the last thing they need is pressure from work, but they don't know how to bridge that gap. They don't know how to talk to their leader about what's going on. That's how we would define success, would be by the magnitude of people that we can help with the work that we're doing. We recognize that this is not for every leader and it's not for every company. The cold hard fact is a lot of companies just aren't ready for this, right? But companies that recognize that resilience is an issue, and recognize that they need a component of their resilience initiatives that tackle personal resilience. That's what we're really doing here, right? We're really teaching leaders how to help employees become more personally resilient by opening up the conversation and the space to allow the things that are troubling them outside of work to be dealt with.
What was the hardest lesson to learn about life as of today?
The hardest lesson to learn about life as of today.
Yeah.
That life is really hard if you go through it by yourself. And so that's been the life lesson for me.
If you knew you would die soon, meaning losing the body, would you make any change in your life or do anything in a different way?
So yes, I mean, I certainly would. There's so much more that contribution that I'm sure I could make personally. Yeah. And frankly, I'm a big believer in continuous improvement. Yeah. And constantly striving to make yourself better. Yeah. And I have a relationship with God, but it could certainly be stronger. Yeah. So that would be something that I continually work on and have gotten better at. That and working hard to be a better friend. The book has helped a lot with that. Writing the book has helped a great deal with that from a personal standpoint. Yeah. To recognize that I do need to reach out to people and not just assume that because I haven't heard from them, everything's fine. Right. So yeah, those would be two things that I'm currently working on that I would continue to work on even stronger.
And speaking of God, who is God to you?
It's really interesting. We had a family priest who at one point, when my wife and I were dating and talking to him about getting married, he made the comment that God is bigger than any church. And that has always stuck with me. So I believe that, I do believe that there is a supreme power, but I also believe that lives inside each and every one of us. And it's up to us to manifest that into real life, through our compassion, and our caring for others and our desire to help others when they need help, and we can lend a hand. That's what I think God is to me. I don't think it necessarily means, I don't think God solely resides in churches and in holy places. I read a book by the author's name escapes me. Matthew Kelly. I read a book by Matthew Kelly, and he talks about creating holy moments. That it's up to each of us to create holy moments every day in our lives, and if we do that, we can change the world. And holy moments could be as simple as saying hello to someone. It could be buying someone a meal. It could be helping someone with groceries. It's the smallest of things. They're all acts of kindness, right? And if we'll just all create holy moments every day, the world would be a much better place. And I think I believe that.
I love that idea and that practice.
Yeah, think about that, right? Yeah. Think about if we each just touched one person every day.
True.
And made their life a little better.
That's true. It is the work of God. Yeah, I would say. Yeah, for sure. And speaking about the sure things that we know, what are 3 things about life you know for sure? This is my last question.
Well, I could give you the comical answer, right? We're all going to pay taxes and we're all going to die. That's 2 things for sure.
Yeah.
Life is short. Yeah. And it gets shorter every single day. That has been... Our son was diagnosed with cancer 3 years ago, and he went through an incredible 2 years cancer-free, or will be next month. And but we're still on that journey, right? I mean, they will not declare him cured until he's 5 years cancer-free. And I will tell you, I've always known life was short, but boy, it really was brought to light when I had to watch what my son was going through his eyes. It was a beautiful experience. I got to spend a lot of time with him. He's 31 years old, or he was 31 at the time. Got to spend a lot of time with him, got to watch him endure through the treatments, got to watch him drag himself to work every single day. He didn't miss a single day of work while he went through his treatments. Also got to watch him get fired by a boss who was totally uncompassionate, and basically, didn't never even recognize that Chris was going through the treatments and had cancer and was still coming to work every day. Just decided that they wanted to go in a different direction and let him go on the day of his last treatment. Is when they delivered the news to him, and then thought they were doing him a big favor by telling him normally we would just tell you to pack up your office and leave, but we decided to give you 4 weeks notice because we know you're dealing with cancer. So just eye-opening. So you know what? Life is short. Life is really, really short, and we need to cherish every moment. And I'm fortunate to be married to a woman who lets me watch the world through her eyes. Because she helps me to remember that we are to cherish the small. And that would be really it for me. Life is really short, and it's a shame that we get so caught up in having to pay the bills and make a living, and the kids' soccer and all of the other things in our life that we don't get a chance to just slow down and really take it all in, because it is beautiful.
Thank you so much, Anthony, for your wisdom, your compassionate work and words, compassionate presence. Thank you for everything. Really beautiful.
Well, it was absolutely my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on and letting us tell the story. And thank you for sharing this with your audience.
Where can we find more information about you, your books, products, services, and future projects?
Sure. Griefleaders.com. That's our website, and it's chock full of information and stories and all kinds of things. And we would love if folks visit there there is a spot for them to leave their story, and we'd love to hear that. That's what helps keep our training relevant and the things we do meaningful. Yeah. And then, of course, they can follow me on LinkedIn or my brother Guy on LinkedIn. And you can get the book through Amazon or through BookBaby. There's a link on our website that will take you to either one of those two sites to order the book. And hopefully folks will pick up the book and get in contact with us and help us help those who might be struggling at work and you don't even know it.
I'll have the link on your podcast profile too. Thank you so much again, Anthony, and we'll talk soon.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening. To learn more about Anthony Casablanca and his work, please visit griefleaders.com.
To learn more about this podcast, please visit fitforjoy.org/podcast. Thank you again for listening, and bye for now.